Okay, that is awesome. Good evening, class. Today we're going to do a pretty long class. We're gonna look at two different things today. We're gonna look at species and hopefully, we're gonna be able to get to protists. Alright, so species are a fundamental unit in biology. We're gonna talk about how we're going to name them. This is a pretty short class, so I merged two of them into one. Species concepts. There's three ways that we're going to name these species. Morphologically, based on their body shape, size, structural features. Biologically, we're going to look at its interbreeding capabilities, and phylogenetic, how it evolved and what was its ancestor. Now, these different types of ways, they have their own benefits, and obviously they have disadvantages. Now, we use linear taxonomy. So this is a cornerstone of modern classification. It used the nested hierarchy to classify organisms into groups like, genus, species, subspecies, etc. And then we have binomial nomenclature, which was introduced by Carl Linnaeus. He assigned each species a two-part Latin name. So genus, and then we have species. Homo sapiens, this is humans, this is us, alright? So, this system helped avoid confusion, and a lot confusion, because there's actually a lot of genus, alright? So we look at one genus, there could potentially be 20 species falling under it, but however, in the past, we didn't have that much. So, classifications. Certain criteria must be met to actually fit within a certain genus. This includes everything that we've talked about in this slide. Maybe some of them has a different shape. Oh, they will invent a new species for you, and so on. Now, taxonomic classification. This is how we organize life. We organize it into a species from domain, right here, all the way down to little species, right here. This is an example. Eukarya, domain. Animals, kingdom. Chordata, phylum, and all of that keeps on going. So, again, series of criteria must be met at each level. Now, this is great because it allows many subdivisions. We can just keep on adding different divisions, whether it's at the kingdom level or the class level or the order level, or maybe even I want to add a new genus. That is absolutely fine. This is a pretty advanced structured, and it's pretty good. However, in biology, we started developing pretty late, so we're still constantly changing, and as we discover new species, we're going to add them. And this is heavily based on top of what we know right now. And unfortunately, we don't know too much, so this could possibly change in the near future, but I'm sure I wouldn't be able to see it, probably. Now, evidence of relationships. Scientists, we use multiple forms of evidence to determine whether something has a relationship in the past. So we use anatomy, whether they have similar structure. For example, we could look at birds, and then we look at owls, and maybe we look at eagles, and then we realize, oh, they might come from the same family. Or eventually we could be like, we compare the physical structures, bones, and vertebrates, or other stuff. So physiology is making similar proteins. Now, later in grade 12, you will learn that proteins are quite important, and they make up the entire life, essentially. So we examine the production of which proteins that they can produce, and this is quite a big similarities. Now we're going to talk about DNA. This is basically the most precise evidence. I'm sure that most of us, whenever we need to see, oh, are you the father? Yes, let's do a blood test. Let's see if your blood test it matches with your dad or your mom's. Let's be like, oh, you are the father. Yes. So this is the most scientific based. This is something we can make right off the bat and be like, hey, these two kind of look alike. Maybe they were related in the past. And this is just advanced technology. This is more knowledge based, but it still requires technology. Phylogenetic trees. Alright, this is very important. You gotta know this for your test. It's visual representations of how the evolutionary relationships go on. It shows connections on genetical anatomical, and physiological. Each branch of this represent a group of organism. So this, and all of this here all fall into this. And then tetrapods, all of this except for Mr. Fish right there, they all fall in this because these are subcategories of the tetrapods. Now, for example, closely related species. Let's just don't look at anything here, but let's say lions or tigers. They share a common ancestor. While like more distant species, maybe humans and frogs, we probably diverged earlier. So like maybe if we put lion here and potentially uh tigers right here, they would match into the same group. But if we put lizards and humans somewhere, maybe humans is right here and lizards like right here. They come in together and share a common ancestor really, really late. All right. The earlier their ancestor meets, the more relationship they have. These trees, again, and I want everybody to keep this in mind if you're going to study biology, they're just theories and they will change as we gather more data. We're not smart. We're not that smart yet. We are very well developed, but we aren't as developed as we think we are. This is something that you're going to do. This is very important. Dichotomous keys. I think I have an example. Yeah, right here. Okay, so this is a step-by-step tool that we're essentially going to use to identify a species. It presents a series of paired or choices, and it essentially guides you towards an identification. However, this is not really efficient. You can just put so much questions there, and you can only have so much species in it. So, obviously, I'm sure we all know how this works. Let's say here's a question. Does the insects have 8 legs? If no, then it's whatever species here. If yes, it's gonna go down to even dividing even further, and essentially it's gonna divide. On this side, it could even divide as well. It could be like, what's the color of this? Bright yellow or bright red, and then it divides here. Is it dark red or light red or whatever, right? So it could keep on dividing. This is pretty useful in the field for quick and accurate identification, but however, it is not as effective as we think because we can only convey so much information through this, and we can only identify so much species. Alright, see, it was quick. It was only like 10 minutes. So we're gonna go into eukaryotic cells with organelles. So we have this theory, and unfortunately it is only a theory. It essentially explains how every cell in the very, very, very past, a long time ago, has absolutely no organelles, and they were prokaryotic cells, and they just had nothing but a nucleus. They were essentially going to eat up all of these little cells that we now call mitochondria, chloroplasts, whatever, and essentially they emerge and they eat them. And they offer them a place to stay. They're talking to, like, this nucleus talking to the mitochondria. Be like, hey, you know what? If you stay here, I'm going to give you a place to live. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to give you shelter. But instead, you got to make energy for me. All right? And then mitochondria is like, hey, you know what? This is a great deal. Let's do this. Now, this process is kind of important because, well, we are literally made out of organelles. And if this didn't happen, we probably would be dead. This process enables cells to basically perform specialized functions. Now, something about this was taught in grade 10. We only learned about single-celled ancestors, and we didn't learn about all of these. All right. So organisms, they had diverse life cycles. These single-celled ancestors, essentially, we were all just single-celled. All right, and multi-cells, they came, or what we call eukaryotic cells, they came so much later, and just so later that we cannot even know that when single cells came, because these are so old, and we can only keep track of these. Now, since we are able to take in all of these random organelles that essentially has a function, we are able to now develop these specializations, whether it's making energy with your mitochondria or transporting stuff with your endoplasmic reticulum or whatever. Now, life cycles. Organisms have different life cycles, just as humans have. You know, if you were born in a rich family, you're probably gonna going to a really good school and getting a really good college. But if you're born like me in a pretty broke family, you're probably gonna become a teacher or a tutor, whatever. And that's not a shot at anybody. Anyways, so we have haploids and diploid cells. Haploid only contains it should say here, but okay, cool. So it only contains one set of chromosome, and diploid cells has two. And then we're gonna talk about how they reproduce. Okay, so essentially, asexual is reproducing without a mate. Sexual gametic cells, sexual zygotic cells, and sexual sporic alternation of generations. These are all producing with a partner, and this is very sad, producing by itself. Now, while sexual reproduction do combine genetic material from two parents, this basically increases genetic diversity and is kind of important. Understanding these cycles will help us appreciate how life will actually change and how we actually evolve. Because if everyone just reproduced by themselves and we won't have any, let's say, genetic diversity, essentially we're going to die because we don't evolve in that case anymore. Protists. Now let's get into what we're actually going to talk about. Protists is a diverse group of mainly unicellular stuff. As I said earlier in like one of the classes, they don't really fit in other groups. So unfortunately, we gotta be like, hey, you know what? You don't fit here. You don't fit here. Why don't we just make you an absolute new one? They're classified as in animal-like. They could potentially be an animal. However, they're missing some part, or they could be classified plant-like. You could potentially be a plant, but however, you're missing some function, or a fungi-like. You might be a mushroom, but maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah. Despite simplicity, Protists is actually really important because algae is one of this, and amoebas is also one of this. So it produces oxygen, quite importantly. Now, animal-like Saracosa, this include amoebas, very obvious right off the bat. It has no cell wall, and it can change its shape using internal skeleton. It's used these temporary projections are used for movement and engulfing food. Now amoebas are adaptable and they are found in basically every environment. Another animal like Ciliophora, they are covered in hair-like cilia. You can see this looks like very spongy. It looks very squishable as well. Now these structures serve only two purposes: movement and food collection. Zoomastigian. Okay, I don't want to pronounce it, but you get my point. These move. Alright, I know you can't really tell what this is, but they move using a whip-like structure called flagella, and they often have protected coverings and can be parasitic, aka living on somebody else, or they could be free living, and they adapt to various environments as well. Sporozoa are basically parasites. They gotta live on something else. They often have pretty complex life cycles. They alternate between hosts. And, for example, Plasmodium causes malaria. And it kind of alternates between mosquitoes and humans. Essentially, a mosquito stinged a human with malaria. The mosquito's gonna get malaria. But then, obviously, the mosquito is hungry again. It's gonna go ahead and sting another human, and then that human has malaria, which is pretty unfortunate. Fungi-like protists, Myxomycota. Now, all of these things you will realize they end in mycota. They're probably fungus-like. These are multinucleate masses that feed on dead organic materials, and they play a role in decomposition, so they're pretty important. Acrasiomycota. They are slimy, very slimy, and brightish yellow color that consists of individual cells that basically aggregate under certain conditions. They resemble with amoebas in look, but however, they aren't. Ooh, mycota. You can pronounce it. Ooh, mycota. Alright, these are water motes. Just simple it down. They feed on dead organic matter, or they act as parasites. They played a role in the Irish potato famine by infecting the potato crops. Not so fun. Chrysophyta, whatever. This, these are phytoplankton. They a type of them. I mean, so they have silica-based walls, cell walls, and they perform photosynthesis. They're once something does photosynthesis, they're basically contributing and a quite crucial part in the aquatic ecosystem. And these, they make up a pretty fair amount of oxygen, which is pretty important. Phyrophyta. These are also phytoplankton, but instead they have two perpendicular flagella, and I can't find one, but it's okay. They can cause algal blooms, which may, and I mean may, deplete oxygen and produce toxins. So, not the best, but they're part of life and they exist. They impact marine life and potentially us. Plant-like euglenoids. Now, this is versatile. It's autotrophic and heterotrophic. It could make its own food or just eat somebody else. They use eye spots to detect light for photosynthesis, but however, they can consume organic material when light is rare and they don't live in a light world. Algae. Now, people be like, hey, is algae a plant? And I know that a lot of people ask this because it's like literally one of the most Googled thing, but unfortunately, no. Algae it's not a plant. It lacks vascular systems and it has no true roots, and it uses a different photosynthesis process. Though algae includes multicellular organisms that are like seaweed, and it comes in different colors: red, green, brown. Sometimes they're classified as protists, sometimes plants. This differs by color. Some algae could potentially have the same photosynthesis pigments as a plant, and eventually they'll be classified as a plant, but some aren't. But no matter what, they are still an essential for oxygen production, and they are really a great food source. Not for us, but for marine life. Now, fungi. Yes. They're all heterotrophs. They will produce their own food, and they will probably absorb nutritions from their surroundings after releasing digestive enzymes. So most of them are multicellular, and very few of them are unicellular, like the yeast. They play a very vital role in ecosystems that we probably heard in grade 9 that they're decomposers. They break down organic matter and recycle nutrients. They're incredibly diverse. They have so much different types of mushroom that you can find everywhere in the forest, and 9 out of 10 of them have poison. You probably will die from them. General structure. So this mushroom that we always eat, that we are like, oh, it's so yummy. They're actually the reproductive structure. So you're basically eating the reproductive organ of a fungi. It's a bit disturbing, but that's okay. All right, that is okay. Mycelium is everything here. It's basically everything that's below the ground. This is a spore producing, which is basically used to reproduce. Hyphae, which is thread-like structures. It's going to form a network. This little string is going to form this network called mycelium. Now, mushroom has really big. All right, this is really big. It could potentially, this mushroom could probably be like 5 centimeters, and this maybe 50 or even longer. Now, this part, every single visible part of the fungi is or you could say mushrooms. This is often the body used for reproduction. So not just this part. This entire part is the reproductive structure. Fungal nutritions. Now, fungi, they have really, really diverse nutritional strategies. They could feed on pretty much everything. Number one is parasites. They're going to get on somebody and be a host. They're going to feed on some living hosts. Sometimes, this thing right here, cordyceps, it actually give the host diseases. So, I don't know why they want to kill their own host, but that's okay. Now, some fungi are predators. They kill stuff. They will trap and consume small organisms like can't find an example, but you get my point. Some fungi are symbiotic. They could be potentially plants, but however, they could potentially also be predators. Now, saprobio, they're probably the most important one. They decompose dead organic matter. They recycle nutrients, and These rows, all of these, their nutrition types make fungi quite essential for maintaining ecological balance because we have a lot of waste going around in the forests. Reproduction. Fungi reproduces a couple ways depending on which fungi it is, which mushroom it is. So usually unicellular fungi like yeast produces with new cells. New cells through budding. These little here, right here, you can see them. Some use fragmentation, so pieces of the hyphae actually breaks. It break off and eventually grows into a new fungi right here. And then lastly is spores. Oh yeah, now I gotta go back again. Wow. Spores. You will release some spores, and most of them, most fungi produces spores, which is obvious for some reasons. It's going to travel a long distance, and potentially it's not gonna harm the parent cell. So if I have a fungi right here and it's gonna grow all of its network right here, it might just throw some nutritions from this fungi. So essentially, most of them are spore producing, so they will follow by the wind and travel far, far away. Deuteromycota. Sexually reproducing, but they have no common structure. This is the imperfect fungi, often referred to. A lack common reproductive structure. They include fungi with diverse uses, such as those that make to use antibiotics. If you ever took grade 11 chemistry, your number one class, your first class is about penicillin. It's basically an antibiotic that kills bacteria. Their unique structure, like these moles, make them a distinct and a very important group. Chytridomycota. This is mainly, once you see the chi, it's either you're a plant or you're in an aquatic thing. This is often found in freshwater environments. They are unique among fungi because their spores have flagella, the little tails. Now, they could be parasitic or saprobile. They play a role in nutrition recycling, and some chytrids are known for causing diseases. And some of them are just known for being here. They don't do too much, but they're still here. We just gotta know them. Zygomycota. This is also called zygote fungi. It is terrestrial and multicellular. They reproduce sexually through zygospores. And essentially, these spores can remain dormant until conditions are favorable. An example is, we don't have it here. We should have it. Yep. So it's strawberry, but we can look at bread mold. It's a good example of this. It demonstrates how their survivability is just so extreme, and they can survive in basically any diverse environment. Ascomycota, or sac fungi. You see, yummy little sacs. Now, this includes species like morels, truffles, yeasts. They reproduce sexually using structures called the asci or asci, whatever you want to pronounce it. This is very diverse in their ecological roles. They could range from decomposers to basically symbionts. They produce their own food or whatever. They have great economic importance. They are very much heavily used in baking and brewing industries. If you're ever going to become a chemist, you'll realize that mushrooms are lovely. Wow, skipped another one. Basidiomycota, or club fungi. It's known for their distinctive club-shaped reproductive structure called basidia, or whatever. Right here, this looks like the classical mushrooms that you see in Mario. It's very funny. You get to eat one of this and you speed up. But in reality, if you eat one of this, you probably get a hallucination in front of you, and you see like, maybe you will see musk. Yeah. And the visible fruiting body is short-lived, and the majority of the organisms actually live down below. So this is something that is used to basically reproduce, and what's actually making it live, and what we actually would consider a fungi, is the entire network below it. This is a vital decomposer in forest, even though it might cause some death from humans, but it still breaks down tough plant materials that we can't. Lichens, or whatever, lichens. I was told that it was pronounced lichens, but okay. They're composite organisms formed by a symbiotic relationship between fungi and photosynthetic organisms like green or algae. This partnership allows them to survive in really, and I mean really tough conditions. Maybe even your kitchen or your bathroom if you don't clean them very often. So, they are ecological pioneers. They help break down rocks and they contribute to soil formation, which is probably taught in geography. And, most importantly, they are indicators of whether the air around you is good or bad. Oh, that's it. Well, I guess that is it. So, concluding this class, we've covered classification of diversity, species concept, naming, taxonomy, a lot of protists, and some fungi, if you are a fungi, whatever. So, yeah, that is about it. Homework will be sent out, and you are going to have you have to make one of this phylogenetic trees, and you gotta make one of this, which is fun, and you have to remember at least one animal like protist, one fungus like protist, and one plant like protist because it's important, and you're probably gonna be tested on this. Hint, hint.